You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 27th of March. Prime Minister opens doors to Indian workers. Aspiring glamour models £5,000 NHS boob job. Budget cuts into counter-terrorism are a substantial folly. Bulgaria, they will come. Danish minister outraged over pork contamination of halal products. Leftist death threats to Swedish Minister of Immigration. Knockout King game still maiming innocents in USA. Egyptian mosque turned into house of torture for Christians. North Korea cuts military hotline with the South. Thought for the day, our police and our human rights. And finally, the birds are back. UK news. Prime Minister opens doors to Indian workers. The Prime Minister's tough talk on immigration and migrant workers is a sham. His recent visit to India was to assure the Indian government that in exchange for London access to India's banking system, the UK will keep its doors open to temporary workers required by Indian companies doing business in the UK. For the Indian students and business people, the UK is warm and welcoming. For the Romanian and Bulgarian brickie, the UK is cold, wet and hostile. In either case, the Indians, Romanians and Bulgarians will still come. Big business and small businesses will still get cheap labour, and we, the British worker, will still be hard-pressed to find a job at a decent wage. Aspiring glamour models £5,000 NHS boob job. Just when you thought the NHS couldn't get any more foolish, they give Josie Cunningham of Leeds a £4,800 breast augmentation because her flat chest was ruining her life. Following the operation to take her from a 32A to a 36DD, Ms Cunningham announced her aspiration to be a topless model like Katie Price. It takes a Belgian news site to tell us that Ms Cunningham has already ordered her Louis Vuitton bag with Chihuahua. Our World at 8 writer says, "It's more a shame and just too bad NHS Leeds didn't waste more taxpayer-funded money fixing the face at the same time." Budget cuts in counter-terrorism are a substantial folly. The London Evening Standard's Robert Fox writes, the government's annual audit of its counter-terrorism strategy makes sobering reading, and not quite in the way its authors intended. It states the threat from Al-Qaeda related groups to this country remains substantial. Al-Qaeda groups were responsible for 600 attacks in Syria last year at a rough count. Syria is full of hundreds of foreign fighters, some from the UK and Europe, and could return to haunt and even attack us. Kidnapping for ransom is now a main revenue stream. Groups like Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines and Taliban groups in Pakistan and Afghanistan have raised nearly £50 million from kidnaps since 2008. The number of terrorist kidnaps doubled between 2010 and 2012. But it is the new shape of terrorist activity, variations of old tactics and groups, that are particularly troubling. European news. Bulgaria, they will come. This headline hides the depth of despair many Bulgarians face each and every day of their life. It is despair that has driven mass demonstrations against high prices, poverty and corruption in the European Union's poorest country, where 1 in 5 people live below the poverty line. On Friday the 22nd of March 2013, an unemployed father became the 6th person in less than a month to set fire to himself to protest the poverty and corruption in his homeland. World at 8 says, yes, they will continue to come, and who can blame them? The European Union and their own government, like so many others, have betrayed their own peoples. The goal of both capitalism and Marxism is to destroy our societies and grind them down. So yes, they will come and soon find that the UK is no better than Bulgaria. Danish minister outraged over pork contamination of halal products. Denmark's meat industry, retail trade and agricultural leaders have been called to a meeting with Denmark's Minister for Food, Mette Gjerskov. The minister is outraged that meat industry cheats consumers by mixing pork in beef products. He said that it's high time that the entire industry takes a serious look at itself. When there's much more than 1% pork in beef products, it is not carelessness with mincers and use of the same knives as industry often claims. It is cheating, and cheating because there is a financial gain from mixing cheap pork in the more expensive beef. The food industry flouts the belief our minorities, who for religious reasons do not eat pork. World at 8 says, no doubt the Muzzies will call this pork terrorism, God save the pig. This minister sounds like he's right at home in the European Islamic Union. Leftist death threats to Swedish Minister of Immigration. Sweden's Minister of Immigration, Tobias Billström, reportedly received a death threat after he suggested limiting the number of immigrants into Sweden. The threat was reportedly tweeted by Christopher Hurtig, the chairman of Young Left in the town of Luleå. The Twitter comment from Christopher Hurtig said, "I want to shoot Tobias Billström. I really look forward to the day he dies. From the depth of my heart, I really mean it." World at 8 says, the left can and do say what they like, with no fear they will be prosecuted. Swedish Marxists are the same as British Marxists, above the law and norms of a decent society. Mind you, the one good thing about the new series revolution in the States is that all the puerile amateur online rantings like Twitter will be gone. World News. Knockout King game still maiming innocents in USA. Knockout King is a violent game invented by a black gang led by Demetrius Murphy in St. Louis a few years ago and quickly spread to other urban areas of the USA. Knockout King typically involves black youths targeting lone white or Asian individuals for violent assault. The goal of the game is to knock the victim out with one punch. Of course, one punch leads to another during the horrifying attack. The latest victim of the game was in New Orleans, where police are baffled by the senseless attack as the victim still had over $300 on him, and the police went on to say they had never seen anything of this nature before. One commentator on a news site said, "Police often ignore the knockout game because it would make their city look bad if others knew mobs of black people were roaming around looking for white people to hurt." One bit of good news is that Demetrius Murphy, the game's inventor, was shot and killed by a white homeowner during a recent home invasion in St. Louis. Good on him. Egyptian mosque turned into house of torture for Christians. Islamic hardliners stormed into a mosque in suburban Cairo, turning it into torture chamber for Christians who had been demonstrating against the ruling Muslim Brotherhood in the latest case of violent persecution that experts fear will only get worse. Demonstrators, some of whom were Muslim, say they were taken from the Muslim Brotherhood headquarters in suburban Cairo to a nearby mosque on Friday and tortured for hours by hardline militia members. Officials at the Bilal ibn Rabna Mosque said that radical militias stormed the building in the Cairo suburb of Motakan after Friday prayers. "We deeply regret what has happened and apologise to the people of Motakan," mosque officials said in a statement, adding that they had lost control over the mosque at that time. The statement also denounced and condemned the violence and involving mosques in political conflicts. The latest crackdown is further confirmation that the Muslim Brotherhood's most hardline elements are now consolidating control in Egypt, according to Shaul Gavay, a professor of international studies at the University of Denver. Sheikh Ahmed Saber, a well-known imam and official in Egypt's Ministry of Endowments, has blasted Morsi's Justice Ministry for allowing persecution of Copts. All Egyptians in general are oppressed, but Christians are particularly oppressed because they suffer double of what others suffer, Saber told MCN. A World 8 reporter comments, "It must be bad for another Muslim to notice it. It shows there is no justice in any Sharia-controlled areas, even for their own." North Korea cuts military hotline with South. North Korea severed its military hotline with South Korea on Wednesday, breaking the last direct communication link between the two countries at a time of heightened military tensions. The decision coincided with an announcement that the North's top political leadership would meet in the next few days to discuss an unspecified important issue and make a drastic turn. The hotline move was relayed by a senior North Korean military official to his South Korean counterpart just before the link was severed. Under the situation where a war may break out at any moment, there is no need to keep up North-South military communications, the official was quoted as saying by the official Korean Central News Agency. From now the North-South military communications will be cut off, he said. This comes following Tuesday's announcement by North Korea that it had placed its missile and artillery forces on the highest alert after North Korea issued fresh threats to attack the US mainland, Hawaii, Guam and South Korea. Thought for the day: what has happened to our peelers and moomin rights? My thoughts will be getting slightly shorter as I am inclined to ramble, and that is boring. But I was shocked and horrified to learn of our police, our peelers, our constabulary actually shooting and killing, after 5 bullets at close quarters, a poor cow, not a human one, who was simply lost after having wandered off. And near a primary school no less, thus giving our little darlings a taste of life in the future, no doubt. I was perusing the web looking for my and finallys, which are usually funny, and came across this gem. Now I know my sense of humour can be a bit off, but I personally do not see the slaughter of an animal, who seems to be no threat to anyone, should be in the funny pages, but I will read the Telegraph report. Police were slammed yesterday after shooting dead an escaped cow in a primary school car park. The Belgian Blue went on the run for almost 3 hours after fleeing its field. Armed officers eventually cornered the terrified beast outside a primary school. Marksmen were ordered to shoot and kill it and open fire with a high-powered rifle. But the cow survived the first 2 shots and didn't die until it was hit by further 2 bullets 15 minutes later. Horrified locals accused police of animal cruelty. Witness Russell Chappell said it was shot twice, then left for 15 minutes before the 3rd shot put it down, and it kicked its back legs for another 5 or 10 minutes. The so-called marksman was less than 100 yards away. It was a joke. A local farmer added, "You don't shoot a cow just because you can't catch it." The police say it charged members of the public, including a child, before leaping a fence onto the school car park. The 170 pupils had been evacuated. Superintendent Phil Vickers said, "Our priority was the public's safety. It is regrettable and sad that the incident ended as it did. We tried everything to capture the animal, but it became increasingly distressed, aggressive and unpredictable." Now call me a tree hugger if you like, but where was the RSPCA when needed, or indeed the cow's owner? Heard of tranquilizer darts and a net? It was one cow, not a herd of wildebeest on the rampage. If I was that poor animal, I would be increasingly nervous after having been tailed by a sodding police car for miles and then cornered in a playground. The fact that the so-called marksman clearly was as good a marksman as me is clear, and believe me, I am bad. On an off topic, I am so bad that when my last company had a clay pigeon shooting day, after a morning of completely trumping my own team with not one hit, they sent me up to fly a plane with a load of skydivers tumbling out at 10,000 feet. I'm quite good at that, but shooting, nada, niet and nein. What about the owner's moomin rights? Cows are expensive. Will the coppers pull together and pay for it? You can bet your bottom dollar not. And to evacuate an entire school over an escaped and frightened cow? Once upon a time kids were taken to farms to stroke them. Our police force used to be the best in the world. Friendly and un-PC diversity-ridden coppers on the streets were a pleasure and not a necessity around 40 years ago. They then decided to change into a progressive police force, which in a nutshell meant no police on the streets, all in panda cars, not on bikes or walking, young university grads, not a copper who'd come up through the ranks with all the experience that entails, and a dismal and unnecessary 100% increase in paperwork before anything, virtually anything or anyone, could be brought to justice, if at all. Put this with the politically correct restraints and the fact of promoting ethnic officers to tackle their high immigrant crime rate, which they don't, and we have the new police authority in all its glory. I was told a story last night by one of our councillors down on the coast. He had a phone call from a fellow councillor in the next borough a short way down the road because they had trouble with youths calling abuse outside their house. Our guy went down after being told the local police had been notified. John drew up in his car and saw a group of youths outside shouting, and he turned on his lights full. They vanished, and John and I now say he has vanishing headlights. Jay went in for a cuppa, and do you know when the police arrived? The next morning. It was one copper only. He's well known in the locale, and he is single-handed all the year. But wait for it, at Easter, that well-known time when people are away and the property's left empty, he's not single-handed, he's not there at all. It isn't his fault, he's happy to do his job. It's his superior officers, and from then upwards, of course, the government, who deem that we Brits are not worth looking after. So obviously poor cows do not have even moomin rights, and we white Brits have even less. This poor teenager stabbed in Birmingham by a coloured lout will not get justice. What have the police done? They've whisked him away to a mental home. Now if he had been white and the victim Asian or black, balmy though he may be, he would have been arrested, charged, pictured on TV and publicly vilified, as indeed anyone capable of this crime should be. It was premeditated, as he was waiting on the bus for her, and she had complained earlier of a guy acting strangely. But what do the police do in the face of human rights? They put him out of harm's way, and Christine's life is over at 16. I don't fully blame the police. They are told what to do to get their pensions. Lucky old them. Destroy or ignore anyone with a nationalistic bent. They are racists or Nazis. Ignore or create disinformation on cases where the victim is white and the criminal of ethnic descent or origin. Steer clear of all areas where there is an Islamic community, Indian, Eastern European, Chinese or indeed any large ethnic base, because you will be accused of promoting racial tensions, even in your own country. Now the people who you must not arrest or stop and search and never ever charge are the following. Muslims. Whatever they do is okay with us, from murder to sexual abuse of minors to inciting racial and religious hatred. Let it go and remember they are strangers in a very strange land. Blacks or black origins. Open season to do anything they like. Run gangs, terrorise their neighbours, shoot or stab anything, openly sell and use drugs and pimp out their sisters. Remember they don't have the benefit of a good education, so go easy. Also, of course, remember Stephen Lawrence. That fast cost us a load of coppers and time. UAF and anti-fascist protesters. It is pain of death and loss of pension rights on this one. Never touch one of these people. They are government bought and paid for. They are manna from heaven for the sheeples, who will always listen to these prats and then think that they themselves are very liberal. Leave them to do our job. So there you have it, a short précis on our modern police. A very good bunch of men and women, badly handled, badly informed and understaffed. Long live Britannia and viva the army. And finally, the birds have arrived. Peregrine falcons attack researchers at a university in the United States after they removed the birds' chicks for tagging. It was reported in the Telegraph that a group of falcons fought back when researchers moved in to tag a pair of falcon chicks in a nesting box on the roof of Toledo University clock tower in Ohio. It was stated that they had only wooden shields and helmets to protect themselves, and the chicks, 2 of them, were temporarily removed from the nest to be weighed, have blood samples taken and numbered bands fitted to their legs for tracking and identification. However, fearing for their young, the understandably protected parents swooped and attacked the researchers. None of them, however, required hospital treatment. The team from the Ohio Department of Natural Resource Division of Wildlife wore helmet cameras which captured the terrifying moment the birds flew at them with outstretched talons. This presenter says, well, falcons are falcons and usually are justified in attacking humans, with egg stealing, bird stealing for export or money or general nastiness. So it was researchers, get over it. As long as the chicks are all right and the parents aren't traumatised. Welcome back, Hitch. All is not lost. You have been listening to The World at 8. A short note to Exodus 20v4v5 and the short clip of Nellie Pledge Goes to London. Lovely. But what would Nellie make of it now? I am Lynne Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. Bulgaria, they will come. Danish minister outraged over pork contamination of halal products. Leftist death threats to Swedish Minister of Immigration. Knockout King game still maiming innocents in USA. Egyptian mosque turned into house of torture for Christians. North Korea cuts military hotline with the South. Thought for the day, our police and our movement rights. And finally, the birds are back. UK news. Prime Minister opens doors to Indian workers. The Prime Minister's tough talk on immigration and migrant workers is a sham. His recent visit to India was to assure the Indian government that in exchange for London access to India's banking system, the UK would keep its doors open to temporary workers required by Indian companies doing business in the UK. For the Indian students and business people, the UK is warm and welcoming. For the Romanian and Bulgarian brickie, the UK is cold, wet and hostile. In either case, the Indians, Romanians and Bulgarians will still come. Big business and small businesses will still get cheap labour, and we, the British worker, will still be hard pressed to find a job at a decent wage. Aspiring glamour models £5,000 NHS boob job. Just when you thought the NHS couldn't get any more foolish, they give Josie Cunningham of Leeds a £4,800 breast augmentation because her flat chest was ruining her life. Following the operation to take her from a 32A to a 36DD, Ms Cunningham announced her aspiration to be a topless model like Katie Price. It takes a Belgium news site to tell us that Ms Cunningham has already ordered her Louis Vuitton bag with Chihuahua. Our World at 8 writer says, "It's more a shame and just too bad NHS Leeds didn't wait."
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 27th of March. Prime Minister opens doors to Indian workers. Aspiring glamour models £5,000 NHS boob job. Budget cuts into counter-terrorism are a substantial folly. Waste more taxpayer-funded money, fixing the face at the same time. Budget cuts in counter-terrorism are a substantial folly. The London Evening Standard's Robert Fox writes, the government's annual audit of its counter-terrorism strategy makes sobering reading, and not quite in the way its authors intended. It states the threat from Al-Qaeda-related groups to this country remains substantial. Al-Qaeda groups were responsible for 600 attacks in Syria last year, at a rough count. Syria is full of hundreds of foreign fighters, some from the UK and Europe, and could return to haunt and even attack us. Kidnapping for ransom is now a main revenue.